The Galactic Museum of Ancient Wonders sat on the edge of the Andromeda sector, a massive structure that stretched across 3 city blocks and reached toward the stars. Inside its climate-controlled halls, artifacts from 1,000 dead civilizations gathered dust behind shimmering force fields. Most visitors came for the popular exhibits, the singing crystals of Mentara or the gravity wells of the Crolian Empire. But in Hall 7, tucked away in a corner that most tourists never bothered to visit, sat something that had baffled scientists for half a millennium. The Drachnori egg looked like a massive pearl, about the size of a beach ball, with swirling patterns of gold and silver dancing beneath its translucent surface. A small placard beside it explained in dry, academic language that the egg had been discovered in the ruins of the Drachnori homeworld 500 years ago. Scholars believed it was the last of its kind. They'd tried everything to hatch it. They'd exposed it to different temperatures, from the freezing cold of space to the heat of artificial suns. They'd bombarded it with radiation, sound waves, and electromagnetic pulses. They'd even tried ancient Drachnori incantations recovered from crumbling texts. Nothing worked. The egg just sat there, beautiful and lifeless, like a statue carved from moonlight. Jake Miller didn't care much about any of that. He was a janitor, and Hall 7 was just another section of the museum that needed cleaning every night. He'd been working the night shift for 3 years now, ever since his divorce had left him scrambling to make ends meet and spend more time with his daughter during the day. The work was simple and peaceful. Most nights, the museum was empty except for him and a couple of security guards who spent their shifts watching videos on their tablets. The problem was the break room. Jake's co-workers on the day shift had a habit of leaving it a mess, and the small space always smelled like burnt coffee and old tuna sandwiches. About a month ago, Jake had started taking his lunch breaks elsewhere, wandering the empty halls with his paper bag until he found a spot that felt right. That's how he ended up in Hall 7, sitting on a bench across from the Drachnori egg. At first, he just ate in silence, grateful for the quiet. The hall had good lighting and a comfortable temperature, and there was something peaceful about the egg's gentle glow. But Jake had never been good with silence. After a few nights, he started talking to the egg the way some people talk to their pets or their plants. "Rough night," he'd say, unwrapping his sandwich. "The buffer broke down again in the main lobby. Had to clean the whole thing by hand. My back's killing me." He'd take a bite and chew thoughtfully. "You know what though? My daughter Riley scored 2 goals at her soccer game today. Coach says she's got real talent. Thinking about signing her up for that travel team, but it's expensive, you know?" The egg never responded, obviously. Jake didn't expect it to. But there was something nice about having a listener that didn't judge or interrupt or give unwanted advice. The egg just glowed softly in the dim light, its golden patterns swirling slowly like clouds seen from an airplane. As the weeks went by, Jake's lunch breaks became the best part of his shift. He'd settle onto his usual bench, pull out whatever leftovers he'd packed, and just talk. He told the egg about his day, about Riley's adventures in 5th grade, about the book he was reading, about his worries and hopes and the little moments that made him smile. Sometimes he'd laugh at his own stories. Sometimes he'd sit quietly, just enjoying the company of something that demanded nothing from him. "You're a good listener," he told the egg one night, crumpling up his sandwich wrapper. "Better than my ex-wife, that's for sure. She never wanted to hear about my day. Always had something more important going on." He stood up and stretched, his joints popping. "All right, buddy. Back to work. See you tomorrow." What Jake didn't know was that the egg had started changing. The museum's environmental sensors had detected a slight increase in the egg's surface temperature, but the readings were so minor that the system flagged them as equipment errors. After all, the egg had been completely dormant for 5 centuries. A fraction of a degree wasn't worth investigating. But the egg was waking up. Deep inside its crystalline shell, something ancient stirred. For 500 years, it had waited in silence, surrounded by scientists and scholars who poked and prodded and analyzed, treating it like a puzzle to be solved. Their intentions were good, but their approach was cold, clinical, detached. The egg had felt nothing from them except curiosity and frustration. Then Jake arrived with his paper bag lunches and his stories about soccer games and broken buffers. He didn't want anything from the egg. He wasn't trying to crack its secrets or prove a theory. He just wanted someone to talk to, and in that simple, genuine desire for connection, he'd given the egg something it had been waiting centuries to find. Night after night, as Jake ate his sandwiches and shared his life, warmth built inside the crystalline shell. The Drachnori egg was finally, after 500 long years, getting ready to hatch. It was a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after Jake had started his lunch routine in Hall 7. He settled onto his usual bench with a satisfied sigh, pulling out a turkey sandwich his daughter Riley had helped him make that morning. She'd insisted on adding extra pickles, which made the whole thing a soggy mess, but Jake wasn't about to complain. Any sandwich made with his kid was a perfect sandwich. "Hey there," he said to the egg, like he always did. "You're not gonna believe what happened today. Riley's teacher called me in for a conference, and I'm thinking, oh no, what did she do now? Turns out she's been tutoring some kid in math during recess. Just decided on her own to help him out. Teacher says she's got a real kind heart." Jake smiled, unwrapping his sandwich. "I don't know where she gets it from. Probably her mom's side." He took a bite and chewed slowly, savoring the quiet of the empty museum. Outside the tall windows, he could see stars twinkling in the darkness of space. The museum orbited a small moon, and the view never got old. Jake was mid-bite when he heard it, a sound like ice cracking on a frozen lake, sharp and clear in the silence. His eyes shot to the egg. A thin line had appeared on its surface, glowing bright gold. Jake dropped his sandwich. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. His first thought was that he'd somehow broken it, that he was about to lose his job over a priceless artifact. He stood up, hands shaking, watching as more cracks spider-webbed across the crystalline surface. The egg began to hum, a low vibration that Jake felt in his chest. Light poured from the cracks, growing brighter with each passing second. Jake stumbled backward, knocking over his thermos, coffee spreading across the floor. He should run. He should call security. He should do something other than stand there like an idiot, but he couldn't move. The museum's alarm system erupted in a shrieking wail that echoed through every hall. Red lights flashed along the walls. Somewhere in the distance, Jake heard running footsteps and shouted orders. The egg cracked wider, pieces of shell falling away to reveal something moving inside, something alive. A small head pushed through the opening, no bigger than Jake's fist. It had scales that shimmered between purple and blue, large eyes that glowed like amber, and tiny horns that looked almost comical on such a small creature. The dragon, because that's what it clearly was, blinked at Jake and made a sound somewhere between a chirp and a purr. The doors to Hall 7 burst open. Security guards rushed in with weapons drawn, followed by scientists in white coats and museum staff Jake had never even seen before. Dr. Villani, the head of xenobiology, pushed through the crowd, her blue skin flushed with excitement. "Nobody move. Don't startle it." But the dragon wasn't paying attention to any of them. It climbed out of the egg on wobbly legs, shook itself like a wet dog, and launched itself directly at Jake. He yelped and threw up his hands, but the creature just landed on his shoulder and wrapped its tail around his neck like a scarf. It was warm and surprisingly light, and when it nuzzled against his cheek, Jake felt a wave of emotion that wasn't his own: happiness, safety, home. "Get it off him," someone shouted. Two guards moved forward, but the moment they got close, the dragon hissed, and its scales flashed bright red. The guards froze. Dr. Villani held up a hand. "Wait. Just wait." She approached slowly, her scanner already out and beeping. "Mr. Miller, is it? Can you tell me what happened?" Jake's mind was racing. "I was just eating my sandwich. That's all. I swear I didn't touch it or do anything weird. It just started cracking on its own." "How long have you been coming to this hall?" "I don't know. 3 weeks? I take my lunch here sometimes." The doctor's eyes widened. She scanned the egg fragments, then Jake, then the dragon clinging to his shoulder. Her device made a series of complicated sounds. "Impossible," she whispered. "The egg's been dormant for 500 years. Every attempt to stimulate a response has failed." "What could you possibly have?" She stopped, staring at Jake's spilled coffee and dropped sandwich. "What were you doing when it hatched?" "Eating lunch. Talking. Just like always." "Talking? To the egg?" Jake felt his face get hot. "Yeah, I guess. Is that against the rules or something?" Dr. Villani didn't answer. She was typing furiously on her datapad, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding. "Oh my stars. We've been approaching this all wrong. For 500 years, we've been trying everything except," she looked at Jake with something close to wonder. "Except just being with it." More scientists crowded around, arguing in a dozen different languages. Someone tried to reach for the dragon, and it hissed again, pressing closer to Jake's neck. He could feel its tiny heart beating against his skin, fast as a hummingbird's. "I think it likes you," Dr. Villani said, a smile tugging at her lips. "What do I do?" Jake asked, afraid to move. "For now? Nothing. Don't go anywhere. We need to run tests, examine both of you, figure out exactly what happened here. She paused, shaking her head in disbelief. Do you understand what you've accomplished? Scientists have been trying to hatch this egg for half a millennium. Grants, research teams, the finest minds in the galaxy. And you did it by eating a sandwich. Jake looked at the small creature perched on his shoulder, its eyes watching him with unmistakable trust. I didn't mean to. The best discoveries never are, Dr. Villani said softly. Welcome to history, Mr. Miller. The next 72 hours turned Jake's life completely upside down. The museum transformed Hall 7 into a temporary research lab, bringing in equipment that beeped and hummed at all hours. Scientists from a dozen different species crowded around, taking readings and arguing theories while Jake sat in the middle of it all with the dragon. He'd started calling her Ember, refusing to leave his shoulder. Dr. Villani had set up a small cot for him in the corner because Ember threw an absolute fit whenever Jake tried to leave. The first time he'd attempted to go home, the little dragon had made a sound like a smoke alarm crossed with a crying baby. Her scales had turned black, and she trembled so violently that even the hardened security guards looked worried. Jake had stayed. Riley had visited on the second day, escorted by what felt like half the museum staff. She'd stood in the doorway, staring wide-eyed at the dragon perched on her father's shoulder. Dad, you hatched a dragon? I didn't mean to, sweetheart. That's the coolest thing ever. Riley had rushed forward, and to everyone's surprise, Ember had leaned down and let the girl pet her head. The dragon purred, a sound like distant thunder, and Riley's face lit up with pure joy. Now, on the third day, Dr. Villani finally had some answers. She gathered Jake and a small group of senior researchers in a corner of the hall, away from the chaos. Her datapad displayed charts and graphs that meant nothing to Jake, but her expression said everything. We've translated more of the ancient Draknori texts, she began, her voice tired but excited. And we've run every scan imaginable on both you and Ember. The results are remarkable. The Draknori weren't just dragons. They were empathic beings, deeply connected to emotional energy. Their eggs don't hatch based on temperature or chemistry. They hatch when they sense what the texts call a heart song. A heart song? Jake repeated. Authentic emotional presence. Genuine connection. For 500 years, we've been treating this egg like a scientific problem to solve. We've used controlled environments, precise measurements, carefully calculated stimuli. But we forgot something crucial. The Draknori were social creatures who valued emotional bonds above everything else. A tall scientist with gray skin stepped forward. Our approach was too clinical. Too sterile. We observed the egg like researchers studying a specimen. There was no warmth in it, no real connection. Dr. Villani nodded. But you, Mr. Miller, you just sat with the egg and talked to it. You shared your day, your worries, your joy about your daughter. You laughed at your own jokes. You complained about broken equipment. You weren't trying to accomplish anything. You were just being yourself, completely unguarded and genuine. Jake looked at Ember, who was watching him with those glowing amber eyes. So I just talked to it, and that was enough. That was everything, Dr. Villani said softly. The egg had been waiting for centuries to feel that kind of authentic presence. Most species in the galaxy have evolved past open emotional expression. We've optimized ourselves for efficiency and logic. We communicate precisely, but we've lost something in the process. That raw, unfiltered humanity you showed, that's what the egg needed. The gray-skinned scientist pulled up a holographic display. We've detected a bond between you and the hatchling. It's neurological, emotional, and according to the texts, permanent. She's imprinted on you as her family. In Draknori culture, that's a sacred connection. Wait, permanent? What does that mean? It means she's yours, Mr. Miller. And you're hers. The bond works both ways. You can sense her emotions, can't you? Jake thought about it. Over the past few days, he'd started noticing things. When Ember was happy, he felt warmth in his chest. When she was scared, his stomach knotted up. When she was hungry, he knew it before she made a sound. Yeah, I guess I can. That's the bond. It will grow stronger over time. She'll be able to communicate with you through feelings and images. Eventually, you'll understand each other as well as any two beings can. A younger scientist raised her hand nervously. Sir, the Galactic Council has been calling. They want the hatchling transferred to a proper xenobiological research facility. They say a civilian can't possibly care for. Ember's scales flashed red, and she made that smoke alarm sound again. Jake felt her fear spike, sharp and desperate. Without thinking, He put his hand on her back. Hey, it's okay. Nobody's taking you anywhere. The dragon calmed immediately, her scales fading back to their normal purple-blue shimmer. The room fell silent. Dr. Villani smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. I think we have our answer for the council. The bond can't be broken without serious harm to both parties. Attempting to separate them would be cruel and potentially dangerous. So what happens now? Jake asked. Now? Now you figure out how to live with a dragon, Mr. Miller. She'll grow quickly, full size within a year, according to the texts. You'll need space, resources, and probably a lot of patience. Dr. Villani paused. You've already received 17 offers from various organizations wanting to study you both. Some are offering substantial money. Jake shook his head. I don't want to be a research subject. I just want to go home, go back to work, and be there for my daughter. The scientists exchanged glances. The gray-skinned one spoke up. You do understand what you've accomplished, don't you? You've solved a 500-year-old mystery. You've proven that emotional connection matters in ways we'd forgotten. That's significant. I ate a sandwich and talked to myself, Jake said. I didn't cure a disease or stop a war. I just sat with something that was lonely. Dr. Villani's expression softened. Sometimes, Mr. Miller, that's exactly what the universe needs most. The news spread through the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry it. Within a week, Jake Miller's face was on every news feed from Earth to the outer colonies. The human janitor who hatched a dragon became the most talked-about story in centuries. Reporters camped outside the museum. Scientists published papers analyzing every detail of what happened. Social media exploded with theories, memes, and endless commentary. Jake hated every second of it. He'd finally been allowed to go home, but home wasn't peaceful anymore. His small apartment had news drones hovering outside the windows day and night. His phone rang constantly with offers, interview requests, and business proposals. Someone had offered him 5 million credits to appear in a documentary. A luxury hotel chain wanted to hire him as a spokesperson. 3 different universities offered him honorary degrees. Dad, there's another one, Riley said, pointing at a drone trying to peer through the kitchen window. Ember, now the size of a large dog after just 2 weeks, growled and breathed out a small puff of smoke. The drone retreated quickly. Jake sighed and closed the curtains. I just want things to go back to normal. Dad, you hatched a dragon. Nothing's gonna be normal again. Riley was taking the whole situation better than he was. She thought having a dragon in the family was the coolest thing that had ever happened. Her friends at school were insanely jealous. The museum had given Jake an indefinite paid leave, which sounded nice until he realized it was because they were afraid of the media circus he'd attract if he came back to work. Dr. Villani visited regularly to check on Ember's development, but even she seemed uncomfortable with all the attention. The real problem started when the offers turned into demands. The Galactic Council formally requested that Jake bring Ember to their headquarters for a full examination. A coalition of xenobiologists petitioned to have the dragon declared a scientific resource that needed to be shared with the research community. And then there were the private collectors, wealthy beings from across the galaxy who saw Ember as the ultimate status symbol and weren't shy about naming their price. Jake refused everything. Each rejection made the pressure worse. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 months after the hatching, Jake got a visit he'd been dreading. A Galactic Council representative named Ambassador Thorne arrived with a security detail and a legal team. The ambassador was humanoid, tall and imposing, with skin like polished metal and eyes that never blinked. Mr. Miller, Thorne said, settling into Jake's worn couch like he owned the place. We need to discuss your situation. I'm not giving up Ember, Jake said immediately. The dragon, now nearly the size of a pony, moved protectively to his side. We're not asking you to give her up. We're asking you to share her. The knowledge we could gain from studying your bond could benefit the entire galaxy. Surely you see the value in that. I see that everyone wants to treat her like a lab experiment. Thorne's expression didn't change. The Draknori are extinct, Mr. Miller. This dragon may be the last of her kind. Don't you think she belongs to all civilizations, not just one human? Jake felt Ember's emotions through their bond, confusion, fear, and underneath it all, a simple question. Why don't they understand? He put his hand on her scales, warm and solid under his palm. She's not property, Jake said quietly. She's not a resource or a specimen. She's a living being who chose me. I didn't ask for this. I didn't plan it. But now that it's happened, I'm not going to let anyone treat her like she's just some interesting puzzle to solve. You're being selfish. Maybe. But I remember what Dr. Villani said. The reason Ember hatched for me was because I wasn't trying to use her for anything. I just kept her company. The moment I start treating her like everyone else wants to, like a means to an end, I become just like all the scientists who failed for 500 years. Thorn stood up, his metal skin reflecting the afternoon light. The council won't be pleased with this decision. Then the council can come talk to me themselves. After the ambassador left, Jake sat on the floor with his back against Ember's side. Riley came out of her room where she'd been hiding during the confrontation. She sat down next to her father, and Ember curled her tail around them both. Are we in trouble? Riley asked. Probably, Jake admitted. But we'll figure it out. The pressure continued. Representatives from various factions kept showing up. Some offered money. Others made veiled threats about legal action or public opinion. A famous talk show host offered Jake his own show. A tech company wanted to create a holographic experience based on his story. Everyone had an angle, everyone wanted something. Through it all, Jake kept refusing. He went back to work at the museum, showing up for his night shifts with Ember following behind him like an enormous, scaly shadow. The other janitors thought it was hilarious. The day shift staff were terrified. Jake didn't care. He just pushed his buffer cart down the empty halls, Ember walking beside him, and felt grateful for the simple routine. Something unexpected started happening. Other humans began reaching out, not with business proposals or demands, but with stories. A teacher from Earth sent a message about how she'd been inspired to spend more genuine time with her students instead of just lecturing at them. A nurse wrote about taking actual breaks to connect with patients as people, not just cases to manage. A businessman talked about shutting down his devices during dinner to really listen to his kids. Jake's story had become something bigger than just a man and a dragon. It had reminded people, human and alien alike, that connection mattered. That sometimes the most important thing you could do was just be present with someone, genuinely and completely. One evening, as Jake took his usual lunch break in Hall 7 with Ember lying beside him, Dr. Villani stopped by. She looked tired but happy. I thought you'd want to know, she said. 3 more Drachnori eggs have been discovered in archaeological sites across the galaxy. The council is organizing a program. They want humans to try hatching them. Jake raised his eyebrows. Humans specifically? Your kind has something special, Mr. Miller. You haven't evolved past emotion. You still know how to just be with someone without an agenda. That's rarer than you think. She smiled. They're not asking for scientists or experts. Just regular humans willing to spend time with the eggs. No pressure, no expectations. Just companionship. Will it work? If your experience taught us anything, it's that we can't force these things. But giving the eggs a chance to feel genuine connection? That's all we can do. Jake looked at Ember, who was watching him with those intelligent amber eyes. She sent him a feeling through their bond, contentment mixed with pride. She knew, somehow, that what they'd started together was spreading. Good, Jake said simply. Every dragon deserves what Ember got. Someone who'll just sit with them and share a sandwich. 6 months after Ember hatched, Jake's life had settled into something that almost felt normal, if normal included living with a dragon the size of a horse. His small apartment hadn't worked out, obviously. With help from the museum and some of the more reasonable scientists who'd been following his story, Jake had moved to a property outside the city, a modest house with 5 acres of land where Ember could stretch her wings and practice flying without knocking over buildings. The backyard had become Ember's favorite place. She claimed a spot under an old oak tree where the grass was permanently flattened from her weight. Jake had built a fire pit nearby where he'd sit in the evenings after work, sometimes reading, sometimes just watching the stars. Ember would rest her massive head on his lap, and they'd exist together in comfortable silence, their bond humming with contentment. Riley had adapted to their new life with the easy flexibility of a kid. She transferred to a school closer to their new home and had become something of a celebrity herself. Her classmates begged for visits, and once a month, Jake would let Riley invite a few friends over. They'd spend hours climbing on Ember, who tolerated the attention with patient amusement, occasionally giving the kids rides around the property that left them screaming with delight. But the real change was happening across the galaxy. Dr. Villani had been right about the other eggs. The Galactic Council had launched what they called the Human Connection Program, though Jake thought it sounded too official for what it actually was. They'd simply asked for human volunteers willing to spend time with the newly discovered Drachnori eggs, no scientific training required, no special skills needed. Just people willing to show up and be present. The response had been overwhelming. Thousands of humans volunteered. Teachers, mechanics, nurses, retail workers, retirees, people from every walk of life who were curious about meeting a dragon. The council selected 50 people for the first round, trying to match different personality types with different eggs. They set up comfortable spaces near each egg and gave the humans one instruction: be yourself. Jake had been asked to give a talk to the first group of volunteers. He'd refused 3 times before Dr. Villani had finally convinced him. Now he stood in front of 50 nervous humans in a council briefing room, feeling completely out of place in the button-up shirt Riley had insisted he wear. "I'm not good at speeches," Jake started, his voice echoing in the large room. "But they asked me to tell you what worked for me, so here it is. I didn't do anything special. I just ate my lunch and talked. I told Ember, well, the egg that became Ember, about my day. About my kid. About stupid stuff like broken vacuum cleaners and traffic jams. I wasn't trying to hatch the egg. I wasn't trying to accomplish anything. I was just lonely and the egg was there, so I talked to it." A woman in the front row raised her hand. Her name tag read Beth. "But what if we do it wrong? What if we're not interesting enough?" Jake smiled. "You can't do it wrong. That's the whole point. The scientists did everything right for 500 years, and nothing happened. I did nothing except be honest. That's what these eggs need, not perfection, just authenticity. Talk about whatever matters to you. Share your real feelings, even the messy ones. Especially the messy ones." A young man in the back spoke up. "What if the egg doesn't hatch?" "Then it doesn't hatch," Jake said with a shrug. "Maybe it needs more time. Maybe it's waiting for someone else. But you'll still have given it something valuable, genuine companionship. That's never wasted." Over the next 3 months, the results started coming in. Not all 50 eggs hatched, but 12 did. A retired librarian named Dorothy hatched a silver dragon while reading poetry aloud. A mechanic named Frank hatched a red one while complaining about his ex-wife and singing old rock songs off-key. A young artist named Casey hatched a green dragon while sketching and talking about her dreams of opening a gallery someday. Each hatching was different, but they all had one thing in common. They happened when the humans stopped trying to make something occur and just existed alongside the egg with an open heart. The galaxy took notice. Academic papers were written, not about the Draknori themselves, but about what humanity had demonstrated. Scientists from advanced civilizations who'd long ago optimized away emotional expression started questioning whether they'd lost something important in their evolution. Some species began exploring ways to reconnect with the kind of authentic emotional presence that humans seem to maintain naturally. Jake found the whole thing amusing. Humanity had always been seen as a younger species, less advanced, more chaotic. They felt too much, they said. They were inefficient with their emotions, unpredictable with their attachments. And now, suddenly, those supposed weaknesses were being recognized as strengths. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Jake's backyard was full. Dorothy had brought her silver dragon, now named Sterling, for a visit. Frank and his red dragon, Blaze, had driven up from the city. Casey's green dragon, Jade, was the smallest of the group, still young and playful. The dragons lounged under the trees while their humans sat around Jake's fire pit, swapping stories and advice about dragon care. Riley played nearby with some of the younger dragons that had hatched recently, her laughter carrying across the yard. Jake watched his daughter ride on Ember's back, the massive dragon moving carefully to keep the girl safe, and felt something settle in his chest, a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with fame or recognition. "You started something big," Dorothy said, following his gaze. "I ate a sandwich," Jake replied, which had become his standard response to any praise. "You did more than that," Frank chimed in. "You reminded people that connection matters. That being present with someone, really present, without distractions or agendas, that's powerful." Jake poked at the fire with a stick. "The dragons did that. I just showed up." "That's exactly it," Casey said softly. "In a galaxy full of beings trying to optimize everything, you just showed up. That's revolutionary." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jake looked at the small community that had formed in his backyard. Dragons and humans, connected by bonds that couldn't be measured or quantified, only felt. The galaxy had spent 500 years trying to solve the mystery of the Draknori eggs with science and logic. Jake had solved it by accident, with nothing more than a turkey sandwich and a willingness to share his ordinary life. Maybe, Jake thought, that was the real lesson. Sometimes the most extraordinary things happen not when you try to be special, but when you had the courage to be genuinely, completely yourself. The universe had plenty of brilliance and ambition. What it really needed, what it had been missing, was simple human connection. Ember rumbled beside him, sending warmth through their bond. Jake scratched behind her horns, and she practically purred. Around them, other dragons and humans did the same, just existing together, connected by something older and more important than technology or advancement. Just hearts, recognizing other hearts, and choosing to stay close.